everybody. Welcome to Vida Tennis, the podcast for those of us who eat, sleep, breathe tennis. My name is Jennifer Gelhaus, and I'm your host. Today, I'm talking to Brian Cunniff. I know Brian from Martha's Vineyard, where he was the director of tennis at the Vineyard Haven Yacht Club for many years. Brian has worked in different areas of the tennis industry, including working as the USTA Schools Director for the USTA Mid-Atlantic office. He was also the Mid-Atlantic Territory Sales Representative for Dunlop Slazenger, and he has taught at some of the most elite tennis clubs in the United States, including the Jupiter Island Club, the Hillsboro Club, and the Palm Beach Bath and Tennis Club here in Florida, as well as the Westmoor Club in Nantucket. Brian grew up in Washington, D.C., and played for the University of Maryland. He graduated with a double degree in communication and law. After graduation, Brian went on to compete on the Men's Pro Satellite Tour for 2 years throughout Europe, India, and Hawaii. Welcome, Brian, to Vida Tennis. Did I get all of that right?
Jen, thank you for being so nice in my introduction. Yeah, it's been a wonderful time over the years, and I've enjoyed all of it, and especially being in different niches of the tennis industry. So I think my most rewarding job was really working with the USTA in the grassroots early on as the Mid-Atlantic USTA Schools Director, covering 4 states and basically going out to schools in faraway places. I went up to the mountains of West Virginia. I did inner city work. I got other pros involved, starting programs. I was like Santa Claus. I was able to allocate rackets and free equipment to communities throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. And it was not a high-paying job. It was definitely Peace Corps, but it was a wonderful experience. One of the things that I did frequently was tennis assemblies, basically tennis shows in schools, primarily for elementary school kids. And I would go to a gymnasium and have a lowered volleyball net. And I had a whole 1-hour tennis show, including an exploding tennis ball. And I would get Mrs. Smith, the librarian, out there playing tennis. And I'd have a microphone system, and there'd be 300 kids out there. So we had a show that was... Yeah, it got everybody charged up. And again, one of the best things I was able to do because of the USTA's involvement in this program was be able to help the school systems with the training, curriculum materials, getting free equipment, as I mentioned, free rackets, free balls. So this was totally free of charge. And the other thing that I did, part of my job was to do in-service training seminars for the movement education teachers. For example, I would get an entire county in Charlottesville, for example, together with all the physical education teachers and do a half a day or a full day training on how to introduce tennis to children in limited facilities. And it was just a wonderful experience. A lot of people may not realize it, but the USTA makes quite a bit of money off the U.S. Open. And the majority of that money that is made goes back into growing the game. Now, some countries don't do that. Mm-hmm. Some countries take 90% of their proceeds and just use it for player development. But the USTA, it's interesting. They have a keen interest in just growing the game and introducing more people into the sport. So that's basically a lot of, their philosophy, which is pretty neat.
Yeah. Now, you went to the University of Maryland and you studied communication and law. So how did you end up going into a career in tennis?
Well, it was something I was doing before going to Maryland. I obviously trained as a junior player in the D.C. area and traveled. And I ended up teaching during the summers. I had some contacts that in the DC area is huge in tennis. There's a lot of elite country clubs, and I was able to get on a list where they would need a temporary teaching pro to come in at a weird time and teach kids that no one else wanted to do it. That's how I got in the door of teaching, and I found myself growing as a teacher and having a keen interest in teaching at clubs like that. And, this, once you get out of college, tennis is one of the few careers where in the beginning, you're top heavy. You're making a pretty good income for just a college graduate. You're almost making as much as a good white collar introductory position, sometimes more.
Yeah.
So once I started doing that, it was really hard to get out of it. I just kept going. And as I said, I got into the USTA and I was able to be a rep for Dunlop Slazenger. And then really the last 15 to 20 years of my career, I would say I've just been working in the exclusive clubs, teaching tennis as a seasonal, traveling north and south, which is a whole different genre of teaching in our industry that a lot of people may or may not know much about.
Yeah, that's where I've been in the last, 10 years or so. But you were at Vineyard Haven Yacht Club for, you said, did you just tell me that you were there for 14 years and you were
14 years, 14 seasons, And it was a wonderful experience. As you know, that island is so beautiful and unique and just amazing. A lot of people never even get to go to Martha's Vineyard. I never knew much about it. And when you take the ferry in there, you're like, wow, this is just a pristine environment. There's no commercialization there, and it's just, there's no Holiday Inns, there's no McDonald's. I mean, basically, it's very different, and you can't, exactly, it's bed and breakfast for $500 a night if you can get one. So the average person can't just say, hey, I want to go over there for 3 or 4 days on vacation. So you kind of learn that this is kind of a special place, and it's beautiful, obviously, but as a tennis director there, as you know, it's a full-time head-on position that requires intensity and virtually no day off for 4 months if you're doing the job really well. And the demand is there where you really have to do that. You really have to be visible.
Were you still on the court a lot as a director?
I was able to hire some great pros, but I was still out there at least 30 to 35 hours a week. And it was just hard to get away. People had been studying with me for so long, and it's hard to kind of bow out. I mean, obviously you're doing events too and collaborating with other clubs in the island to do different things, which takes time to put together, but I still put a lot. I was pretty active on the court still.
Yeah. You're still really active on the court. I mean, right now you're down here in Florida working at the Hillsboro Club, and you told me then you're going to Jupiter Island, and you're in the heaviest portion of their season, which I'm very familiar with. It's no joke. You're on court.
Yes.
10 hours a day.
It's very.
How do you do that? How have you been able to do that for so long? How do you take care of your body?
Well, I was a gym rat, growing up, and physical training was one of the, I lived in the gym and did, pretty high intensity training with weight training and sprinting and running stadium stairs and all those crazy things to help my tennis. And I've just kept at it. I feel like it's helped me over the years for sure, but it becomes more of a grind. There's no doubt about it, especially if you're going 3 or 4 weeks in a row of 9 to 10 hour days. And you're doing it with zeal, and you're doing a number of physical lessons each day. So it's, we'll see. Just taking it one day at a time at this point. So the next 3 weeks are very challenging because all of the clubs down here in Florida, the wealthier clubs, are packed with families that are off for spring break. So you're teaching every age, every ability level, and there's just an overabundance of members that come in that are keeping all the pros busy. We have 6 pros here at the Hillsboro Club and 8 pros at Jupiter Island. So we bring in 4 guest pros at Jupiter Island, and we have 2 here. So, and they're all booked.
Yeah, it's no joke. And you're able to, transition into a new club that might have a different culture, a different director. They can do things differently. If you were to give, a young pro some kind of advice on how to do that, what would that be?
That's a great question. One of the things I'd recommend, Jen, for someone that wants to dip into the water and check out the elite seasonal clubs, is what I'll call it. I mean, the Greenwich, the Meadow Club, the Hamptons, Vineyard, Nantucket, Palm Beach, Jupiter Island. I would get in at a club like that in one of those areas, even if you're the last pro. If there's 10 pros there and you're number 10, get in, especially if you're under an operator, a director that is well established, where you can learn, that has a great reputation. Not everybody does. So I would look for a great reputation, a director that's proven, even if you're the last pro. Get in with a great staff where you're going to learn every day. Seminars are great, classroom is great, but when you're out there with 9 other pros that are phenomenal, you learn and you pick up things. You pick up things that are extremely valuable. And I've been grateful. I've been around amazing pros for so many years. That's what I'd recommend. Jumping in there, try to get in even if it's the last person. It's very hard to break in because most of the clubs that I was talking about don't take projects. I mean, they really take proven people with experience, but there are exceptions. A lot of times, you understand this, you can get in as I'm calling it a guest pro. And what I mean by that is during the peak time periods, Thanksgiving for a week, Christmas for 2 or 3 weeks, President's Day week or 2, spring break. A lot of the clubs are in need of someone to come in, someone excellent, even for just a few weeks. And that way you can dip your toes in the water and kick the tires and see if it's something that you really like. And not everyone's going to adapt to it. It's not for everyone. Some people need to be at a public club. Nothing wrong with that. But everyone has their unique skills, and what's required at a public club is different than a private club many times.
Absolutely.
Not that anyone's better than. There's some amazing public tennis centers around the country that have all sorts of things going on. It just depends on what I like serving in the niche that I'm doing right now, that I've done for the last 20 years.
What is your favorite thing about your job?
I think the people I meet are movers and shakers. I mean, they're the CEOs, they're the Harvard professors, they're NFL owners, they're all sorts of unique people. And it's an honor and privilege to serve them in their face. I mean, you're right there. And it requires more service. The service is just a higher standard. I like that. I like being in that way. It makes you a better professional. I think when you're working in that environment, it's very easy to get sloppy in a public area, I think, a public arena sometimes when things aren't as required. I mean, you could do a lot of places, you can do B- or C work, and it's acceptable, but you can never do that at an exclusive club. People are paying too much money. People are too astute. They're always expecting the best.
What is the biggest skill that you think you've acquired as a tennis pro?
I think it's learning reading skills, reading what each person wants and doesn't want in a lesson. This is, I think, where a lot of people miss the boat. They overteach. And you have to realize the seasonal clubs, you're not at a 50-week club where you're working with people every single week. You're developing that relationship. These people are members of 3 or 4 different clubs around the country. So a lot of times you're not their primary professional. And I think you have to restrain a little bit unless they say, hey, let's go over this. Let's get in depth. I mean, all the pros are doctors of kinesiology. They can go out and, refine strokes, but that's all, a lot of times that's not really what people want. And it's their world. I just live in it. It's really their lesson. They're paying the money for the lesson. I don't, if they want to go out there and just talk to me or just to get a workout or just have fun, there's nothing wrong with that. And you have to, as a pro, I think, my opinion, you have to say, hey, that's great too. Nothing wrong with that. And eventually they may come around after you've established a relationship with them over the years. Hey, can we get a little more, detailed on a certain area? But you have to really be perceptive on that. And it takes time, I think. So
yeah, I like how you said reading, not hearing what they say, right? Because those two things don't match up. What you hear might be something that they're asking of you, but then, based on what happens in their body language and a multitude of things, that then you kind of start figuring out the reason why they're really there,
Yeah, it's a true story. Everyone's there for a little bit different reason, and you have to embrace that. Read it, because if you read the wrong boat, you're going to go off on a tangent where it's not going to be received that well a lot of times. So yeah, it's so easy to overteach. You have to really say, wait a minute, it's their time. They're in a beautiful island. They're on vacation. Maybe you're just there to give them a great experience.
Yeah.
And gradually work in a few things, but it's challenging sometimes to do that for a lot of people.
Especially if you want to work more with high performance or something like that, then this is definitely not the career path for you.
That's so true. There are two different tangents there, and that's what makes the tennis industry so interesting. There's different genres of teaching, in my opinion, and they're all excellent. I don't think there's anything better than the other. There are people that do player development, high performance that are so phenomenal. I mean, that's not my gifting. I'm good at it, but my real gifting is in another place, another arena. So I think everybody gravitates to where they desire, hopefully, and where their gifts are.
And that might change also throughout your career. I think
they will. Yeah, exactly. And that's why, I'm grateful. I did public arena in the USTA. That was wonderful. Learned a ton. It was really enjoyable to get back. I learned business with Dunlop Slazenger, being a rep. Everybody wants to be a rep. Nobody really understands what that is. And I remember being we always went to the Super Show, which is a giant tennis manufacturing show, and it usually was in Atlanta or Las Vegas. And we'd set up these giant booths, all the big tennis companies, and we would be there showcasing our new product lines for buyers. And we would get people come in there and say, hey, I want to be a rep. Can I apply? And we'd probably take 100 resumes. There's only 17 of them in the country. For most of the company, for our, that was only 17. And you had to, that's what helped me. I transitioned from USTA, where I was covering the 4 states and meeting with all the pros, and I went to all the clubs and knew everybody. That's how I got an interview with Dunlop Slazenger. And the other way I got an interview was I called the rep and said, can I help you in some of your demo days? What do most people call the reps for? Hey, can you give me 3 or 4 sticks and some equipment and free
gear.
you know how many calls a day as a rep? You're covering 4 states. And who calls in and says, I want to help you on a demo day? Very few people. That's the other thing I'd recommend. If you want to go in that niche, in that arena, call one of your reps. Call them all in your region of the country and say, can I help you out? You get to know them. And you get to learn what they're doing. And a lot of times they can put in a word for you and say, Brian, I'm heading to Wilson in about 3 months, but I can get you an interview with, Dunlop. If you want I can get you into the top 8. Then you got to win the position.
And right now you're working with all ages, skill levels. Do you have a preference for adults or juniors?
That's a great question. Jen, I love working with adults. I have a passion for adults. I love men's and women's clinics. I think sometimes the men get neglected at certain clubs, so I have a affinity for them, getting them going. That was one of the things that we always had a great women's program at the Vineyard Haven Yacht Club, but I was able to get the men going also. I think I have more of a passion at this point for adults, honestly.
I think that's something else that kind of changes as years go by, I guess, in your teaching career. I still enjoy the kids as well. I like to teach both, but yeah, that's just me. I'm not, I like to mix it up. Sometimes I get a little tired teaching adults. With kids, you can be a little bit tougher, not tougher, but you can just kind of tell it how it is a little bit more than with adults.
Right. I think anyone just coming into the industry needs to build up their skill set and teach all of those groups. That's the goal, is to be able to teach, in my opinion. One of the big goals is to be able to teach any age group and any ability level and any persona. If you want to really move and fast track your career into better positions, I think those 3 things are key.
I think a lot of times it's when you're when you're a young pro, because you're coming most likely from some kind of high performance environment. I think the hardest thing is to teach little kids and to teach beginners.
Yes.
Because that's like
Yeah.
a total opposite environment of what you're used to.
It is.
You know,
It is. I mean, at that stage, you're trying to make it comfortable and simplify things and really make it enjoyable as a new player into the sport. And that's one of my passions now, is bringing new adults in that haven't played a whole lot. I just have a special place in my heart for new adult players that have never played. I mean, I love working with 3-5 levels and 4-0, and that's all. It's enjoyable to get into calculus also with strategic play and doubles, but it's all different in some ways. In a lot of ways, they're just different categories, I guess, of teaching. But the goal, I think, is to try to be as skilled as you can in each of those. And if you want to move on, it depends what you want to do in your career. I mean, I guess there's some people out there who have made a career of just being a specialist in juniors. Of course, hey, I want to run a junior academy. And they go on to do that, and they do it great. And that's phenomenal. Wonderful.
What about events? You like running events I guess for both junior and adults, most of the times is social events for adults. How do you like doing that?
I do. One of the events I've been doing that has been really popular the last, I would say, 5, 6, 7 years is 105. And it's just a game that is taken off. It can be social. It's not as intimidating because you're playing on a team of people of 2 to 4 people, and you're not serving and you're not returning serve, and it's not a tournament. So one of the things I learned years ago is when you classify an event as a tournament, nothing wrong with doing that, but you scare a lot of people away that won't dip in and do that. So when you do a social, it's a little bit more, okay, maybe I'll come in and do that. If you want to have a larger outreach to your membership. And
that's a great point to watch your terminology there.
Yeah. Wording is key. People get frightened, and the thing, and some people don't like serving, or they don't feel like they're good at serving. Well, 105, you do not have to serve. Now, in some ways, that's not good. If you want to go on and play regular tournaments, but again, it's their world. I just live in it. So, I'm going to have I think the key is to have a menu of events between mixing social and competitive tennis. I've been at some clubs, the Greenwich Field Club, years ago, at a grass court club and clay, and the play level was so high. It's just we had to do a lot of tournaments and competitive play because that was the environment. I've been at other clubs where most people just want social and have fun, and that's okay too. But you have to recognize what is your membership like at your club? What do they really want? I think it's good to offer a menu, but as the director, you have to kind of understand what is the barometer of where a lot of your people want to be, if that makes sense. And it varies club to club.
It does. And sometimes you have to kind of go by history and what has been successful in the past, because sometimes you'll get a board member that's new and they want to change everything, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to love it. So you kind of have to be knowledgeable of what has worked in the past and keep that when you come into a new club. I
think that's such a wise comment. I think that's a great observation. And for new directors, you have to be careful. You don't want to shake things up so much where it just, there is some tradition and frame of reference that people are comfortable with and that actually liked. And I think change has to be usually gradual over years. And sometimes keeping most of the things, I don't know. I mean, it depends on your club. A lot of people don't want that big of a change. Some people do. Like you said, someone will come in and that's new and wants to shake things up. But sometimes it really is treading on water and making sure. I just think the first year or two, there shouldn't be a lot of major crazy changes unless things were just in a disastrous mode prior to that. So Sometimes that's the case, but not usually.
Did you have a pro shop at Vineyard Haven Yacht Club?
Not really. We did racket stringing, and we had some demo rackets. We sold junior rackets. We sold balls and accessories. I didn't, the season, as you know, is so short there. And this is the thing some of your listeners may or may not know is that the seasons, like Maine, I would say, is the shortest season. And that's like 7 or 8 weeks. And then there are seasons that are 10 weeks. And there are seasons that are 4 months. So, but when you're talking about a short season like that, it's very hard to stock things, and it just doesn't. It goes too quickly. The season just runs through, and you're not at a 50-week club, year-round club.
I feel like maybe the farther north you go, the shorter the season. But
that's exactly it. Yeah, it's too chilly too in Maine. It just works out. Our director here, Brett Gady, who you may want to chat with at some point, he's tremendous. He also is a Jupiter Island alumni. He works at the Seal Harbor Club in Maine, and it's just a very short season. It goes quickly. And that's the way it's made up. It's okay. That's the way, some people like, I like a short seasonal position. Maybe you should check it out. Maybe you should. But again, there are not a lot of these positions around. If you're looking at the scope of the entire country, someone had a statistic years ago, I don't know if it's still true or not, that there were somewhere in the matter of 13,000 certified tennis pros in the country that did this full time. And that's not a lot. And then when you look at how many clubs would you classify as exclusive seasonal clubs, that's a good I'd have to research that, but it's not many. It's not like you've got thousands. You probably have thousands of year-round clubs.
I also feel like things are changing a little bit now with tennis going more into a rackets industry. There's clubs in the Northeast that are or used to be seasonal and now are changing to year-round because they're adding pickle, they're adding platform tennis. So they want you to be there year-round. And how do you feel about that? How do you think that's going to?
Well, I think it can work. I mean, it's the pro. It's going to depend on the pro. I mean, a lot of pros, if the change is that maybe they have another job in Florida, so they might not be able to do it. But is it a good thing for the club? It could be. Yeah. I mean, it could, pickleball, as you know, is the fastest growing either activity or racket sport in the country. And I think one of the reasons is it's very user friendly. You're not covering a lot of land. It's very easy to learn compared to tennis. And people, you don't have to be in amazing shape. You can get out there and still have fun. And it's more social. I think a lot of clubs, this is one of the greatest debates, I think, that's happening behind boardrooms right now is, do we add pickleball courts to our club? Do we renovate our regular courts? Do we build new ones? Do we have the land? And, there's some really good models down in Naples for some reason. That's like a pickleball haven. And a lot of clubs down there have done it right where they separate their pickleball center. It's not loud. It's far away from the tennis. Those are clubs that have the land to do that. Not everybody has that luxury. But I feel like that a lot of times the noise level for tennis players, if you're playing right next to a pickleball match and you're playing a serious doubles tennis match, might not be too fun. Anyway, and I think the big decision is, like you brought up earlier, is like, all right, they're having arguments, or I would call them debates, healthy debates in the boardrooms. Like, all right, how do we upgrade our club? And is this one way to do it?
There's definitely a demand for pickleball, and in the Northeast, there's demand for platform or paddle.
Yeah. And you get more of your membership involved. You're just, it's always probably a good idea to offer more on the menu.
Yes.
For your club.
It's definitely good for the members and for the club because now they're offering more things for their members to do, to be active at the club. It's an added value.
Sure.
The only thing that kind of worries me a little bit is, a lot of these seasonal jobs, they provide housing usually for the director. And what I'm wondering is, now they're changing these positions to a year-round situation. Are they going to still be able to provide housing, or how is that going to work? Because the cost of living in these places is
cost of living. I could never have done it in Greenwich or the Vineyard or Nantucket unless you have complimentary housing. I mean, down here with the nice clubs, I don't know. I mean, I think that Peter Bromley was the director of tennis at the Greenwich Field Club. He's one of the best. I've been able to work with some amazing pros over the decades, and he was certainly one of the best maitre d's, where he established great relationships with the members over years. And he was able to say, listen, he would go to members and say, I need 3 guest houses for my pros to come in, the new pros coming in. He'd had 10 pros at his club, and the top 3 got housing, free complimentary housing. I remember going there my first year, and I stayed in a castle. I walked in, and I didn't know where he said, I have some excellent housing for you, Brian. And again, this is a member that he had developed a relationship with, and I had the 4th floor wing. And I mean, there were Renoirs and all these fancy paintings that I knew nothing about it was just it was a gigantic castle. Said to myself, this is where I want to be teaching in this environment. I think that's cool. Your time is respected. And a lot of times in the public sector, it's not as respected as much. In Jupiter Island, for example, the way we're set up, we do it here at Hillsboro too. Most of the clubs do this. If it rains, and you're 16 minutes into the lesson, the members charge for the half hour. If it rains and you're 46 minutes into the lesson, you're charged, the members charged, and they know that. And they're fine with it. Now, at a public club, they're going to come back and say, hey, you owe me 13 minutes.
Yes.
Well, do you want to work in that environment? I mean, I'm just saying that's what will happen. So those policies have to be really adjusted, unfortunately. And I like those policies. When I started working in this environment, I thought, man, my time is appreciated. In my opinion, this is where I want to be in a club where, okay, I'll give you an example. Jupiter Island, we must have still have $150,000 worth of product in there. The nicest of everything, equipment, clothing. We don't have any prices in there on anything. People just come in and get what they want. They don't come in and say, can you give me a deal on this? And can you bring that stuff is petty. In a public setting, a lot of times you're going to get that. So it's just different. It's noticeable.
I've had a very fortunate situation sometimes too, where I've been very lucky to stay in, some unbelievable places, like housing wise, and some not so great. It's not always.
That's the other part of the. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it can be very primitive sometimes too, especially if you're just a regular staff pro, you're just starting out. I've stayed in dorms before, college dorm up in Westchester. I mean, I had no air conditioning and it was free housing. But I was hungry. I wanted to break in and be in that environment. So a lot of times you have to suck it up and do things like that. And a lot of times it's not comfortable. It can be very tough. Yeah, not everyone's going to stay in a castle.
I wouldn't tell anybody to really expect that, because you just don't know what you're going to get.
Exactly. You can't expect that. And housing is getting tougher and tougher. And one of the things we did at Vineyard Haven Yacht Club is the club purchased a gigantic home 10 years ago, and for housing for the club. It's an investment for the club. They own this giant house, and they built apartments in it. They've used that for housing. And Edgartown Yacht Club does that also, and a number of other places do that. But housing can be you have to have big shoulders to do it, to go back and forth if you want to do it full time. north, south, because, you're working on Christmas. You don't have a Thanksgiving. I haven't had a New Year's or a Christmas in decades. There's a sacrifice that you have to be willing to do if you want to be in that environment. That's why it's tough. That's what makes it very hard.
Do you take any time off?
Well, there's shoulder seasons, and that's usually between, normally a Floridian season will be 5 months, and then you'll have a month or two before you start. Depends what your season is up in the north. So that's the fun time. I have a house in Virginia, and my license says that I live in Chesapeake, Virginia. But the reality is, where do you live? People would ask me that question. Well, you tell me. I'm in Martha's Vineyard for 4 months, and I'm in Florida for 6 months. Where do I live? I have a house in Virginia. So it's different. If you're really living on the road doing it like that, it's very, very difficult. Some people will establish a home in one place and just do one season. They'll just go north, for example, which is fine. But when you do both, it's tough.
Yeah, that's what I've done. I live in Tampa, and then in the summer I go north, and that's my main gig. Is my summer job. That's what I prioritize.
Yeah, and you have community. You have something called community in Tampa. You have friends. You have relationships. You have a life, and that's a thing that's often missing. That you have to sacrifice doing the seasonal part of the teaching. It's very rewarding. It's very unusual. It's very different. Financially can be very good, but there's some very hard work, but I think it makes you a better professional in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can't believe you do both. I mean, I know a lot of people that do both, super busy seasons, like the busy season in the South and then the summer in the North.
Yeah.
I don't know that I could fully.
Well, it's insane. I mean, it's funny because those are the two questions I get. Well, where do you live? I'll tell you where I stay and where I work.
Yeah.
Do I live there?
Oh my gosh.
And the other question is, why aren't you married? Well, I can't imagine bringing somebody into this that would do both, north, south. Most normal people want to live and work in the same place for the entire year. That's normal. Where you actually have community and roots in an area. By doing this is. Yeah,
now, let me ask you a more of a business question. Are you an independent contractor, or are you a mixed?
Independent contractor at Jupiter Island, and I'm a regular employee where they're taking out taxes and Social Security in Nantucket and also at Hillsboro here.
Do you have a preference for either one?
It's probably better to have the taxes taken out. I mean, you're given, it's a very false sense of what you're really making when someone just gives you a full check, which is a 1099 at the end of the year, and you get all this money, but then you owe all these taxes. As far as working in either of those environments, I think it's probably better to do to have taxes taken out. But I mean, if you're disciplined to put the money aside, and with north-south, you have a lot of write-offs that are legit with travel, but it can get. You just have to be ready. You have to be doing quarterly, if you're supposed to, quarterly checks to the IRS or estimates, and you're going to have a tax bill.
Yeah, a lot of people end up creating LLC because all the different independent contractor jobs you get, it's just better. You get more protection, I guess, with an LLC. And I was actually looking at something like that. But yeah,
we both know an expert at that. Cunniff is probably the most skilled person that I know of in our industry that's an expert in that. He's really good. It's been a good ride, but at the same time, it's getting, I can see some light at the end of the tunnel. It's been good. It's been great, but I'll keep doing this. It's been, my phone keeps ringing for some reason. And, I'm in positions right now where I've developed relationships with directors. We were talking about this before we went on the air here. And they'd give me liberty to come in and to come and go and kind of work a little bit more of what I want with my schedule. But that's taken years to do that.
Of course. What would you say has been the grand slam moment of your teaching career and the double bagel moment of your teaching career?
I think one of the things, I remember my parents coming down. They didn't really understand what I was doing when I first started out at Jupiter Island and then going north. And they came down, and I remember my first lesson when they came down was with Howard Johnson, Mr. Hojo. These are real people. I remember getting off the court, and there were a number of other people that day I taught that they knew. Oh, yeah, I know that person. Gee, I see it in the store all the time, their name in the store. And then they said, now we get it. Now we understand what you're doing. Because if you don't see it, feel it, it's not going to register. It doesn't really register with a lot of people. And the other thing that they saw, that one of the first years I was working there, is the Money magazine always ranks. They have rankings of the top wealthiest cities in America, and Jupiter Island was number one. They were ranked number one, and they're always ranked super high. But I think my parents just understanding now, because they're both college professors and they're more accustomed to, my whole family's gone into, just like most people do, 12-month positions in one place, and doing this thing is a little unusual, but it's legitimate, and they're great. They're real jobs. They're not casual. They're serious, and they saw that. And I think that was one of the greatest things that I've experienced, where they have come to understand what I do and to respect it. Lowest thing I can remember, I can't think of anything too low right now, but I'm sure there's been a lot of them, I'm sure.
You remember the good stuff. That's good.
Yeah, I think the tough. You look back on this, and my first teaching job was when I was 16 years old. I was with Park and Rec. They just needed a body to come in there, and I remember interviewing with the lead person that hired the tennis teachers for this county, Prince George's County, and the woman's name was Elliot Carlson, and technically she wasn't allowed to hire anybody that young, but she was desperate. And I had just won the county championships, and I'd never taught tennis, and I was thrown into teaching adults. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
I was intimidated. I was petrified.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I've got adults in front of me and I'm a kid. So that was one of you look back on and laugh, but that was one of a little frightened at that point, I think.
It only made you a better pro.
Yeah, exactly. All these experiences do, honestly. I think I've been really, really fortunate and blessed that I've worked with in DC, they're phenomenal pros at the nice clubs. And I was able to work with a lot. You learn from all these people. You learn something. It's been very good. Very grateful, Jen.
Yeah. How can people find you if they want to reach out to you with any questions or any?
They can email me. I'd be happy to give my email. It's Brian.P as in Patrick .Cunniff, CUNN as in Nancy, IFF as in Frank @gmail.com. If I can help answer any questions or clarify some things, or if anyone has any comments, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Be happy to do that.
So much,
I'm on Facebook too. I'm on Facebook also. Thanks for thinking about me.
Yeah, of course. So happy to have you and give us a different perspective of what it's like to be a seasonal pro and do the north-south thing when it comes to teaching. It's a very different environment, and I don't think a lot of pros are too familiar with what that world is like. So we got a little
true story,
inside look at it today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for listening to Vida Tennis. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Brian. He's such a nice guy, and I feel that he really gave us a true sense of what the life of a traveling tennis pro at these clubs in Florida and the Northeast is like. If you're enjoying this podcast, please leave me a review, rate the show, and subscribe so you get notified when new episodes come out each week. You can also follow Vida Tennis on Instagram. The handle is simply Vida Tennis Podcast. You can also email me at vidatennispodcast@gmail.com. Until next time.